Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Buckeye Blueprint, your weekly source for Ohio State football analysis. My name is Colin Hassel, and I'm joined as always by Nick McWilliams and Jacob Myers of the Lantern. And for the second week in a row, Ohio State absolutely demolished their opponent 62-3, this time taking down Maryland. And I guess looking at this game, the one thing that I want to take a look at is what can we really learn? Because this is the second week in a row that Ohio State's won 62-3, and I think we all can agree that Maryland is not exactly Nebraska when it comes to their football prowess.
Yeah, I mean, as evidence of the two fans left in the stadium in
at the beginning, or
I would say in the third quarter. But consistency, I think you finally found it with this Ohio State offense. You know, I think we were all impressed. We said before the Nebraska game, what you see is what you're going to get. You're not going to get these 40, 50-point games of 500 yards of offense from Ohio State. Well, we were most certainly not correct on that. These two straight weeks really proved that.
All right, I have a question though, because when I look at this team that's playing right now, I sort of see similarities to at the beginning of the year where they dominated Bowling Green and Tulsa and Oklahoma, and then they sort of struggled. So, like, what is the difference between the team that's playing now, the team that played and struggled in the middle of the season, and the team that played at the beginning of the year?
Well, you know, at the beginning of the year, they were playing really loose. I think they knew walking in every week that's like, you know what, we've got this. We've got easy opponents all the way up to Oklahoma, of course, and there's going to be no problem for this. Well, in recent weeks, we've heard nothing. We've heard like so many times from the team that, you know, we just have to look ahead to the next week. Like, it's just the next opponent. That's what has to be our focus. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure, you know, just thinking about the middle of the season, I don't think that was their focus. I think they were looking way too far ahead. They were looking past opponents that, you know, they weren't really concerned with. You know, Northwestern was a very close game. Indiana gave them a run for their money and everything, and then we saw the loss to Penn State. So I think it was just a case of that they've refocused, and it's like, you know what? Each week is one season. You have to put all your effort into that 1 week and go to your next opponent.
So is this an Urban Meyer job? Is this where Urban Meyer has just, at the end of the year, or the Ohio State Buckeyes are peaking now and they're looking up and this is how they're going to play? Or is there some sort of way that maybe they're going to overlook their opponent again this week at Michigan State?
I mean, not saying that it can't happen, but you look, especially the last three seasons that we've seen, Ohio State loses a game, they just keep getting better each week, progressing, and especially last year against Michigan and Notre Dame, two very, very competent defenses, and yeah, as you saw these past 2 weeks, OSU's offense is just clicking everywhere right now, and I mean, I think you can really look at the pace of play there with, whether that be they're having an easier time reading the defense, if you know, they're finally using Curtis Samuel the way they imagined. I know we disagree with us on several times, but I think we come to a conclusion, you know, whatever they're doing right now is exactly what they need to be doing to have this type of success.
Well, you know, I will say this week I had the realization when I looked over at you and I said, you know, earlier this year I said Curtis Samuel can't carry this offense, rather. And I think it's safe to say that I was definitely wrong in that. You know, he had 3 touchdowns against Maryland. Yeah, Maryland's not the peak of, you know, what you wouldn't count them as one of the top teams, but it's still 3 touchdowns is an impressive mark.
Yeah, he's the only player in the NCAA with 600 rushing, 600 passing yards. He's already on pace to break Percy Harvin records at Florida.
Well, on pace to get 1,500 total yards too.
Yeah, you guys both did mention the Curtis Samuel part, and the one thing I thought was interesting coming out of this game, there is literally only basically one thing that I thought was interesting, is they took a lot more shots downfield. Do you think that was sort of them testing out, can we do this against a better opponent, or do you think that's something that maybe they're starting to feel confident about right now?
You know, I think they're just seeing the mismatches. I mean, what Curtis Samuel told us after the game is that when he sees a nickel back on him, he knows right away that he's going to go for a poster and JT's going to find him. I think just that recognition alone has really made a difference these last 2 weeks. And, you know, JT said after Northwestern that they take what the defense gives them. Now, if they can bait that secondary to come in and, like Curtis Samuel in the backfield, Mike Weber back there, and try to look for those screen passes, and secondary kind of creeps up, and that really opens up the downfield passing.
Yeah, you know, earlier JT Barrett said, you know, we're taking what the defense is giving us right now, and a lot of the times that was 10-yard passes, probably shorter than that normally.
They're still doing that.
Exactly, yeah. But I think what now they're doing, rather than just sticking with that and just going, well, you know, we'll take little tiny chunks at a time. Now you're seeing them get more confidence. You know, they have the defense cheat in for that short stuff now, and they're like, all right, let's try to test it out. Let's go downfield. You know, we saw against Maryland, there was a deep ball to Curtis Samuel early on in the game that Barrett just happened to miss. The very next play, they went right back to him again. Easy touchdown in the end zone. So, I think they're finally realizing, well, we need to just start complementing each part of our game. We need to, if we're going to throw it short 3 plays in a row, the defense is probably going to be cheated in a few yards.
Yeah.
And, you're going to get that single coverage over the middle. Like
When you play as quick as OSU does, the defense doesn't think as it should when, you're winding down the play clock and snapping the ball with 5 seconds left on that play clock. The defensive IQ of those players isn't at the highest level it could be when you have that hurry-up offense.
And so I don't know if there's much more to talk about against Maryland.
I think we milked it a little bit.
I think we did. That's true. But before we go into the Michigan State game, I know we all want to talk about the College Football Committee playoff rankings. And this week was sort of chaotic. I didn't think that we thought so many teams, number 2, 3, and 4, would lose. So now Ohio State's the number 2 team. How can we frame this so that is there a way that Ohio State can beat Michigan, which I think we all know that they have to do, and not make it? Or is that sort of implied that if they beat Michigan and they may not go to the Big Ten title unless Penn State loses, they still may not make it?
Well, I think what may have been the biggest thing for Ohio State is the committee's really honoring Michigan. They just lost to a 4-4 or 5-4, whatever it was, Iowa team.
An Iowa team.
Yeah.
The Kirk Ferentz Iowa team.
That has underachieved all year, and yet they remained in the same spot. Now, given a lot of teams lost this week, and I understand that. Michigan, very good team. They're going to give a great game to Ohio State. Having that 2-3 matchup or whatever it may be, that being the last impression on the committee, it would be a precedent if OSU doesn't make the Big Ten championship or doesn't win that and still gets in, but as you're looking right now, I think you're sitting pretty confident if you're Urban Meyer.
And I know a few years ago we saw TCU was 3, and then they didn't play the last week of the year because the Big 12 doesn't have a title game, and then they dropped out of it completely.
Yeah, and I believe they won 55-3 in their last game.
But the one thing this year is, you're right, Ohio State does play the number 3 team in the nation right now. So in my mind, I understand that this hasn't happened before, so we don't have any precedent. But I just can't see Ohio State dropping out unless, obviously, they lose to Michigan.
Yeah, JT Barrett said
or this week, which we might talk about. Go ahead.
JT Barrett said the exact same thing. He's like, if we win out, how can you keep us out? Just look at the way this team performed. There is one thing that might actually hurt Ohio State if they find a way to win these next 2 games. We don't know the status of Wilton Speight, the starting quarterback for Michigan. We heard that he had a broken collarbone from that Iowa game. Jim Harbaugh, being Jim Harbaugh, denied those claims, said he hadn't heard anything from a doctor. But the way he was acting, we were watching that game, it seems fairly certain that he is pretty hurt. So, maybe the committee looks at that. If Ohio State goes in and they actually take down Michigan, which, we're looking too far ahead. I know Michigan State's next. But if they are to take down Michigan, is that going to hurt them if Speight doesn't play? Because, you've got a guy who's attempted, 18 passes this year, who's going to be the starting quarterback. He'll have more if he plays this week against Indiana. But I think if Ohio State wins out, regardless of what happens with Penn State and everything, this team is really proving how good they are. And against Michigan State and Michigan, they can only go up. Well, they can only go up or fall very, very far.
Yeah, and I'll say one thing about that is I think the best case scenario for Ohio State is if it is Penn State, Wisconsin, which is how it's kind of looking to be in that Big Ten title, it's best if Wisconsin wins that game because if you're just thinking about it, how could you put Wisconsin in the playoff over Ohio State when Ohio State won at Wisconsin? I mean, you kind of look at the head-to-head, and the committee has said...
difficult. This is the one thing that you don't really know, and if it comes down to that decision, I'm not really sure where they're going. And the thing is, no one can be sure because this is literally unprecedented. This committee has only been here for a couple years.
Right.
We have no idea what's going to happen. Well, that's the interesting part.
Something you have to look at, though, is if it's Wisconsin and Penn State in the Big Ten championship game, and Wisconsin comes in and beats them, that loss to Penn State doesn't look as bad since Ohio State.
I think the committee's already forgiven that. To be honest,
right? Exactly, because putting them in the second position so just easily. I mean, I understand 2, 3, and 4 did lose, but you got to look at how the season's progressed for Ohio State. They've had some cupcake wins. To start the year, they just destroyed Bowling Green and Tulsa. Not great teams in any regard. So I think right now this committee is just looking at Ohio State and the ability they've had in years past, and even right now how they've looked in these past 2 weeks, and they're thinking, you know what, this team probably does deserve to be there.
And I know we want to move on to Michigan State here, but the one thing that I will say, I don't really think that Ohio State gets in over either Penn State or Wisconsin. I think that both of them would jump Ohio State, even if Ohio State beat Michigan, just because they really weigh these championship games so heavily. And as someone who's really paid a lot of attention to the Big 12 has been really hurt by not having a game that last weekend that means everything in my mind. I think that Ohio State would drop out if it came in that situation. I don't think it will, but if that happened, that would be really interesting. So moving on to Michigan State. Entering this season, many people thought Michigan State would drop off after the recent success, but I don't know how many people thought that this would happen. They're 3-7 right now. But I think that some people may think that they're still a bit of a sleeping giant because they're a Mark D'Antonio team, and he is. I think a lot of people remember that Big Ten championship where Ohio State lost, and they remember Michigan State coming here and all that, the rain and that terrible weather
and the windmill celebration.
Yeah, they remember all of that, and they just have PTSD from that. Makes sense. So going into this game, do you think that fear is worthy?
Urban Meyer has a great amount of respect for D'Antonio, as does D'Antonio for Ohio State. I mean, he coached here in the 2002 national championship team. They're fierce competitors. D'Antonio knows how to get it done in November. Although watch out Penn State in 2 weeks as they travel to Beaver Stadium. But OSU is going to have to be on the top of their game. I think that crowd is going to come out and support their Spartans, especially on Senior Day. Billy Price said last year the Spartans spoiled their Senior Day. Now it's their opportunity to do that. You look here, I think OSU is going to get it done. It may be close in the beginning of the game, but that defense is really going to get to the quarterback. You look at the Rushman package of Jalen Holmes, Bosa. I mean, Dre'Mont Jones has even been in there at times. Sam Hubbard, Tyquan Lewis. I think OSU gets it done 41-16. I think it's going to be a very handy victory. I mean, how could you not pick OSU to put up an impressive performance right now?
Listen, I'll be right with you in that prediction in a second. Let's hear from Nick first.
Well, Pat Elflein and Billy Price both said multiple times this week, records don't matter in this game because Michigan State and Ohio State, it's a very, very interesting battle. It always has been, it seems like. In these past few years, it's just been always so tight and so close. And, those scars still haven't healed from last year. There's a lot of those players who are still very hurt from that game. So the thing is, you have to balance coming out. You want to get revenge on this team real bad. You want to get after them. But the problem is if you look too far ahead like that, or if you think too much about that, you are going to make mistakes, and you are not going to stay on your assignment. So I think Pat said it. He said we have to stay focused, and we have to just treat this game like it's any other game against a really, really good opponent. Because Michigan State is still a very skilled team, in my opinion. So I think it's going to be a little bit closer than that. I think it's going to be 35-21, just because I know how Ohio State can play in East Lansing. Michigan State does not go away easily. So I still think that they're going to be able to get the win, and it's going to be a convincing enough win that, it's like, all right, Ohio State's still a great team. But I predict that the Michigan State defense is going to turn over JT Barrett a few times in this game.
And so I think that I really do think that this team that's playing right now is sort of similar to the team that played at the beginning of the year with this confidence and there's no way that they're going to lose. And the thing that I think that you said that's true is they see this Michigan State team and they see this team as an elite team still. They don't see the 3-7 because they have this recent history with them where there's no way that they're going to overlook Michigan State. Maybe other people will overlook a team that's 3-7, but in Ohio State's eyes, they're still Michigan State and they're Mark D'Antonio. So I think that Ohio State wins 45-24. I think maybe they'll have some struggles, but at the end of the day, I really feel confident that Ohio State's going to get it done. Do you have any thoughts on Malik Mcdowell before we leave? It's Malik Mcdowell versus Pat Elflein and Billy Price and the Ohio State offensive line. It's going to be the one matchup that's going to be really fun.
We don't even know if McDowell's going to play, as D'Antonio ruled him out, and then he said, well, if he starts, well, then he'll play. If he doesn't start, he won't play. So, we'll see. Last year he only had one tackle against Ohio State, but there's no doubt that he was a force on that defensive front.
As a fan of football, I think that this matchup, we all need to see this matchup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, something I find interesting there, though. I feel if the game's on the line and McDowell might be healthy enough to play, but, he didn't start, right? D'Antonio's going to put him in. Yeah. I mean, there's no way you can keep that guy out.
All right, and so that's been the show for today. Thanks both to Nick and Jacob, and we'll see you all next week.